There's been a Daily Beast article and just more commentary in the mainstream about all the scandals that have rocked comics lately. But the challenge is that it doesn't still feel to me like anybody actually wants to solve this. They want to kind of talk about it. It almost feels like kind of a perverse, unveiling of what's going on in comics, like a self flagellation. But it doesn't actually feel like there's any solutions really being offered, other than kind of a vague "it shouldn't be like this." Well, yeah, it shouldn't be like this. I think most people agree with that. So who's going to drive the solutions? Well, I'd like to talk about a couple. So this is more a positive video, I think, in the end. There are some things, some parallels to draw here that we can take a look at. Hey everybody, this is Perch, and it probably feels a little depressing, a little kind of like the wind's being sucked out of you to some extent by listening to all these allegations of creators coming out and kind of the behind the scenes stuff that seems pretty dirty. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, this wasn't new news. If you've been paying even close attention over the last 10 years or so, the comments and the allegations have come out before. It's just nobody really seemed to care about them. And today there is a lot of commentary going on, but it to me it's still I still struggle to really feel like anybody cares, because while people are kind of dragging various creators through the mud and holding people accountable, so to speak, it still feels like a lot of tweet storms and not a lot of actual policy changes. You're kind of left to assume that maybe some of these people won't be hired again, but you also have no real concrete proof that things are going to be much different after this. That the next person that comes along isn't going to do the exact same things, and because a lot of the allegations are just so incredibly vague, it's hard to really pinpoint down when somebody has crossed the line. You just kind of once they've got there, but part of having a stable, strong group and a company and a system of people who respect each other, a culture that works, is that you have a lot of clear signs of when you're getting close to that line. You have a lot of, I don't say warnings, but you have a lot of information about when you've gotten out of control, so you know to pull it back. It's how a lot of us, you know, uh, stay in a civilized society. Here's the weird part about all of this is that the two largest publishers, the ones in which, if they make a move, if they do something, a lot of the smaller publishers follow suit. If there's a variant cover plan, or if there's a storyline, or if there's a hiring practice, or if somebody gets famous at one of the big two, they can go to one of the indies, and the indies largely take a lot of what the big two define as, the way to do things. And the big two, Marvel and DC, both are owned by some of the biggest media conglomerates in the world: AT&T, Time Warner, and Disney. And here's the even weirder part: is both of those companies, more than most. I mean, I'm sure there's some others out there, but the one of the interesting factors in all this is that the majority of people in comics, and certainly where a lot of the loopholes have taken place, is because the comic writers, creators, are independent contractors. It means they're not truly employees; they're freelancers, and that's created a certain loophole of, for lack of a better word, a lack of accountability, and that can be tough to deal with. Microsoft very famously had trouble dealing with the contractor in IC, independent contributor role, so much so that they got sued and had to basically put a practice in place that if somebody was a contractor for too long, the company either had to hire them or change their status in some way. But here's and this is the goopy part. Again, I'm sure there is a company that's done more, but in the top 10 massive employers, certainly in the US, Disney and AT&T are both pretty high up on the list of hiring and dealing with lots of ICs. They've done this for decades. Many of the people who work in the parks are ICs. Many of the licensors, many of the people in that company have this same status. And And there's been legal battles, and there's been a lot of debates, and there's been structure built up. And there's been millions of dollars spent on legal and HR. Walt Disney Parks and Resorts, that's a massive entity that knows how to deal with these types of employees, these types of contractors, these types of workers. AT&T, same thing. They've got a number of technicians and people in the field that are not employees. They've had, I mean, AT&T had, famously, legal and HR departments that would monitor this stuff to really make sure that when people were hired, there was proper checks and balances. That they were protecting the promise of a tech going out to somebody's home in their name, and not stealing, not doing anything criminal, doing the right things, making sure that if somebody's buddy was hired, that they went through rigorous background checks to make sure there was not fraud or other problems. These pieces were done. And if you're Marvel or DC, you've got not just a template of how to do it, you've got parent companies that know how to do it. And in so many cases, that's the ultimate solution here. It starts at the top, really, where there needs to be a commitment to change the way people are hired, to change the way they're retained, and to put in place policy guidelines. The challenge that we have with comics, and this is why I'm skeptical that we see real changes coming, is that there's almost a kind of this knee-jerk belief within the creative field that in order for somebody to be creative, in order for the business to be free, to have these artists kind of come up with their creations, that we need to keep them at arm's length, and we can't regulate them too much. We can't put too many rules or oversight over them. And that's largely nonsense. This is not like hiring Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel. It's still a business, and you're producing comic books. And the amount of freedom that ICs have is not, it's disproportional to what makes sense for this industry. The other thing that the comic business really enjoys right now is the hiring practices are super loose. If you if you want to work with a buddy that you used to work with in a comic store or video store, it's very easy for you to get that person a job. And on one hand, that's nice that there's not a lot of weird loopholes and bureaucracy that prevent you to work with people you really want to work with. But on the other hand, that's one of the biggest sources of where a lot of these problems exist. When you have somebody who's, maybe not trustworthy or doesn't have the best judgment, and they lobby to get their friend in, and their friend doesn't go through the, decent vetting, that's where, honestly, the problems we've been talking about over the last month is where many of them occur. It's weird because I talk to comic creators from time to time, and every now and then I meet somebody, and I always gain an immense amount of respect for them. And there's two people out there who, if they're listening to this right now, they know I'm talking about them. But it is where somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to, I have some friends I'm bringing in, or I have some people that I'm bringing into this line that I'm curating, or I'm in charge of, or I'm working on a comic, and I bring this person in." And they say, "I feel responsible. I need to make sure that my actions don't impact them, that if I do something, that I'm not taking food out of their mouths, I'm not hurting them. And at the same point, if they do something crazy, it reflects on me." Now, this sounds weird because if you've worked in any kind of normal job, what I just said probably is, common sense to you. If you work in if you work at Walmart and you convince your manager to let your buddy work there too, and then your buddy turns out to be a crazy drug addict and steals things and blows things up, that could look badly on you. So, you wouldn't unless you were also a lunatic, you wouldn't bring a lunatic into the company because it would blow back on you. But in comics, for whatever reason, a lot of people do not have that DNA. It's more unusual. What I said about the people who take responsibility, that's the more unusual stance to take. That's why I have such respect for the people who have said things like that. And what's crazy is I don't think they even realize it when they're saying things like that. They're almost trying to convince me, like, You understand this, right? That that we we have to take responsibility over people that we bring in and over the jobs we create. And and I'm always inside my head, I'm like, oh man, this industry's so weird, because nobody should have to be convincing anyone else of that. um, just This is common sense, but not in comics. So if you're going to fix these problems and truly fix them, you're going to have to largely take away that loophole, or rather, you're going to have to put some oversight into it, rather than it being a few people who feel like they have responsibility over kind of their buddies and other things to help get jobs. Everybody's got to feel that responsibility. If they don't, they shouldn't be bringing their buddies in to have a job at all. And that's the crazy part. But it comes down to this fundamentally. In comics, uh, if change is going to occur, if we're going to get to a place that's maybe a little bit more healthy, then number one, people are going to have to take more responsibility for their actions, good or bad. Number two, there's going to have to be basic HR, oversight over some of this stuff. I hate that beeping, by the way. I'm doing the video and now you're hearing my car do stuff. But anyway, and there's always people who are like, man, this guy drives reckless. Anyway, um, doing the videos while I'm backing up. Yep, that's what's happening here. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. Look, I think AT&T and Disney have very good frameworks for handling HR, handling these issues. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. And granted, every time I do one of these, somebody goes, well, what about that one guy 2 years ago that was stealing stuff? Yep, there's still loopholes that occur, but they're a lot less, like transformationally less. And most of the problems are talked about in the Daily Beast article and some of the other things that have been brought up would be addressed by simply having consistent, HR, background checks, hiring, code of conduct, both online and at conventions. And it will require that people give up some things. Note that some of the people who have been complaining the loudest about things like social media policies and it's never going to be, it's not fair for us to be, have any rules assigned to us, are also the people complaining about grooming and some of the stuff that goes on conventions. Well, they go hand in hand. If you push and fight and demand that your industry is the Wild West in terms of rules and guidelines and any kind of oversight over actions, then this is the inevitable result. You're going to have people who will abuse this system. So the solution to all this is honestly very, very simple. And by the way, I'll take it a step further. It's not just the solution to the problems, it's also the solution to how more money gets into this business. When you operate with such loose restrictions and such kind of crazy no standards in some cases, you wind up leaving a ton of money on the table. The reality is comics would be a much healthier place if there was a little bit more control over what was being put out. Imagine for a moment you take the Sean Gordon Murphy's White Knight universe, or his comic. He did this series and it sold really well, a nice surprise hit for DC, better than people expected. What did DC do? Well, they figured out how to make a sequel to that, and then more. They're following the money. But for every success story with a series like that, you've got dozens and dozens where money was just left on the table because people didn't know how to capitalize on what they had going. I've made fun of things like Future Foundation from time to time, a series that got canceled pretty much at the same time the first issue came out. Well, with a little bit more planning, a little bit more structure, maybe a little bit more marketing, maybe a little bit more confidence in that title, that could have gone much longer. It could have worked. Kids in space. I don't know. Netflix seems to make it work with series that they do. Why not Marvel? A lot of these series should work better than they do, but they don't because there's no real oversight, no real paying attention to what's going on, and it results in this. So I hear about these things. I think there's very easy solutions, but they're not in the articles. They're not being talked about. That Daily Beast article kind of ran everybody through the gutter a little bit, but there was no, it talked about as some people have taken a pledge to promise to be better. Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Just people are going to kind of promise to be better, and for sure, all these people are reliable, right? I mean, you know, if everybody just says, "Hey, we'll cut the shenanigans," it will be fine. That's where we want to leave it. I mean, okay, it's the honor system. Let's see how that works out for us. I think that again, these problems and everything that's going on, overthinking the problem is a mistake. Sorry, overthinking the problem. Overthinking the solution is a mistake. There's easy solutions here. There's solutions that have been in companies for 20, 30, 60 years that apply here. It's just right now, from what I can tell, people are not angry enough or frustrated enough with the problem to buy into those solutions, because it will mean some of the freedom goes away. Some of the freedom to just randomly hire people that, that don't really have any qualifications or haven't gone through any kind of background check. It means that, maybe the crazy off the wall, you won't believe what happened drunken party that you like to talk about years later, you wouldn't be able to do that anymore, at least not on the company's dollar. It may mean that you have to check with somebody first if you're a senior official, if you're a high level manager, before giving money to people online who are known agitators. Maybe you won't be able to do that. Um, are we ready to give that stuff up? When we are, I think this problem will be easily solved. Doesn't feel like we're ready yet, so I guess we'll just wait around, wait for another dozen of these things to happen, maybe something worse. Unfortunately, it feels like something worse has to happen before people kind of finally wake up and say, all right, we've had enough. We actually just would like to make some money, more money than we make now. We'd like to actually have this industry grow, significantly. And, we're tired of harassment stories. We'd actually like to put an end to that. So I guess we'll sign up. It's like we're ready to put on the big boy pants and become adults. It's kind of how it feels. I don't think this is a right or a left thing, by the way. People have to come in and it's like, oh, it's weird on videos like this, like you're playing to the right or you're playing to the left, are the two biggest complaints I get simultaneously. I don't think this is a right or left thing. It's kind of just common sense. Are you ready to go from kind of junior high school to college? That's kind of what it feels like. Like, are we still going to mess around for a while and see how bad it can get? Choice is ours. What about you? What comments do you have? What thoughts do you have? What opinions do you have on all this? Leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, notification if you want to. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. And thanks for listening.